Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're going to get into something really fascinating, a strange confluence of diplomatic attacks and military tech
All
revelations.
right.
And our sources are pointing to one single event that seems to have kicked it all off: the Edex arms exhibition in Cairo.
Yeah, and it's a really interesting connection. We're looking at sources that are linking this technological unveiling of a very specific heavy weapon with these immediate, and I mean simultaneous, political escalations from two regional powers,
Israel and Ethiopia.
Israel and Ethiopia.
Yeah.
And this isn't just your typical regional politics. The real story here, the theme, is how a country taking a big step toward military self-sufficiency can just, instantly rewrite the rules of the game.
It kind of erases the leverage other countries thought they had.
Exactly. The leverage is gone.
And it all centers on the Egyptian Defense Expo, Edex. What's so amazing is that the weapon that caused all this alarm it was mostly overlooked by the international media. They were focused on other flashier things.
Here are the big missile systems, the jets.
Right. But our sources say that internally, this one item caused genuine panic in both Israeli and Ethiopian high-level circles. So that's what we're going to trace today, that panic and the fallout.
Okay, so let's unpack the centerpiece of this whole drama. It wasn't a new fighter jet. It wasn't a missile. It was an Egyptian-produced version of a bomb, the Mk-84.
Right, or the 84A. And we absolutely have to start with the specs on this thing to really get why it's so important.
Play it on us.
Well, the Mk-84 is sort of a crown jewel of strategic bombing. It's usually very tightly controlled by the United States. And it's just a massive piece of hardware. It weighs over 2,000 pounds.
So around 900 kilograms.
Yeah, about 907 to 910 kilograms, to be precise.
That is a heavy payload.
Incredibly heavy. And the crucial part is that almost half of that weight, about 450 kilos, is just pure high explosive material.
Wow.
This thing is designed specifically to take out hardened targets. Bunkers, fortifications, the impact capabilities our sources cite are just staggering. It can literally bore an 11-meter hole in the ground.
11 meters. Or, if you're talking about reinforced targets, it can punch through 3 meters of solid concrete.
And the blast radius.
The lethal effects can reach up to 400 meters. So this isn't a tactical weapon. This is a strategic asset built to destroy high-value infrastructure.
Okay, so Egypt has had the Mk-84 for a while as a U.S. ally. That's not the news. The real revelation at Edex was that this specific bomb is now being made locally.
Locally and with a key addition.
The domestically developed glide modification, let's pause on that. That's the part that turns this from just a big bomb into a geopolitical headache.
It's the entire story. The glide modification basically converts what was a standard grabby bomb, something you just drop vertically.
Right.
Converts that into a high-precision standoff weapon. They add a wing kit, a tail guidance section, and because it has no engine, it is incredibly cheap to mass produce.
So once it's launched, it just glides to the target.
It glides, and that dramatically increases the distance the plane can be from its target.
So what kind of range are we actually talking about here for a heavy weapon like this, but with no motor?
The conservative estimates, they suggest a minimum of 50 kilometers. But the source material we're looking at indicates the maximum practical range is probably closer to 80, maybe even 100 kilometers.
That's a huge standoff capability.
It is. And for our deep dive audience, it's worth noting how it guides. It's not super high-tech propulsion. It uses a relatively low-cost but very effective GPS-aided inertial navigation system, an INS kit.
So it's accurate, cheap, and you can make a lot of them.
Exactly. You bypass the need for expensive, complex engines.
So to put a pin in it, the immediate cause of all this anxiety in two different regional capitals is this one specific item, a locally made, heavy, long-range, inexpensive glide bomb shown quietly in Cairo.
That's a huge leap in capability and in self-sufficiency.
Right. So let's look at the reaction from Israel first. Why does Egyptian domestic production of this specific bomb cause so much alarm there?
Well, historically, Israel has been a major recipient of U.S. military aid, and that includes the Mk-84. Our source points out the U.S. has actually used the supply of this bomb as a political lever.
A tool.
A tool, yeah. For instance, the Biden administration, for a brief time, suspended shipping the Mk-84 to Israel during certain operations in Gaza.
A move that was later reversed by the Trump administration.
Right, but it highlights the dependency. It shows the leverage the U.S. holds. And Israel really relies on these. They used this exact type of bomb in a key strike against Iran.
So if Egypt, a major regional power they have a treaty with, can suddenly produce this weapon completely on its own,
then a huge point of external American leverage just evaporates. That supply control is gone,
Yeah.
and that fundamentally alters the regional balance of power.
Okay, so there's the military concern. But our sources connect this directly to a very public political action. Almost immediately after the Edex reveal, Israel announces this surprising plan to open the Rafah border crossing.
Surprising and with a very severe catch.
One-way traffic only. Palestinians could exit Gaza, but they couldn't return.
Yeah, and the analysis we're seeing interprets this as a very sudden, unnecessary escalation. The goal, according to the source, is to push displaced Palestinians toward the Egyptian border,
To pressure Egypt.
to pressure and destabilize Egypt politically, maybe even as part of a coordinated strategy against Cairo's growing influence in the region.
And what's the specific link to Egypt's influence that makes the timing so suspicious?
The documents we reviewed suggest this is a direct move against Egypt's, its developing ability to control and monitor Palestinian factions. The source specifically brings up a new Egyptian command base in El Arish,
Okay.
which gives them much greater oversight over forces operating near the border, including those training in Egypt and Jordan. So you can read the Rafah move as a quick geopolitical counter to Egypt's growing control over that situation.
All right, let's shift our focus now down the Nile to Addis Ababa. Why on earth would the production of a heavy glide bomb in Cairo cause panic in Ethiopia?
For Ethiopia, it's purely about geography. That 80 to 100-kilometer glide range we were talking about, that's the whole issue.
Because of the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam, the GNA.
Exactly. When you look at the dam's proximity to potential launch zones, that range becomes incredibly strategic. It could allow these Mk-84s to be launched before the aircraft ever has to enter contested Ethiopian airspace.
Meaning they could hit a strategic target like the GERE without having to penetrate Ethiopia's air defenses deeply.
Precisely. It makes the threat much, much harder to mitigate. And just like with Israel, in parallel with the Edex revelation, Ethiopia issued this incredibly strong diplomatic statement against Egypt.
And this wasn't just your standard diplomatic back and forth. The language was exceptionally aggressive.
It was. We look at the Ethiopian Foreign Ministry statement. The accusations were sweeping. They explicitly accused Egypt of launching a broad campaign to destabilize the entire Horn of Africa.
With Ethiopia as the main target.
The main target. And then they really escalated the rhetoric, claiming Cairo is still influenced by a colonial-era mentality.
That's a very loaded phrase in regional politics.
Extremely. They said Egypt was trying to monopolize the Nile's waters using these old colonial-era treaties as a pretext.
So what makes the timing of this so notable? I mean, especially given the whole GERD dispute has been going on for years.
Well, the source material really emphasizes Egypt's posture over the last decade or so. We're talking 15 years of them trying to negotiate, even after the Ethiopian delegation famously walked out on talks hosted by Donald Trump.
They chose not to escalate.
They deliberately chose patience, non-aggression. They focused on their own military and economic buildup. So for this severe, unprovoked diplomatic attack to come right after Egypt shows off this new military hardware, it really suggests a coordinated effort to distract or contain them.
Which brings us right into the information war aspect of this. Alongside the official attack, Ethiopian state TV hosted someone they described as being of Egyptian origin.
Yes, and this person basically launched a PR campaign praising the GERD while actively criticizing Egypt's own Aswan High Dam.
The claim being that the GERD was superior because it didn't displace anyone or damage artifacts.
A very clear attempt to paint their project in a positive light for the international community.
And this is where the fact-checking in our deep dive becomes so crucial. The documents we reviewed immediately shot down those claims.
They did.
Official figures actually confirm Ethiopia displaced 3,700 families. That's around 25,000 people from the Gumuz community, seizing their land without proper compensation.
That's a huge human cost to just gloss over. And it gets worse. International human rights groups have suggested the real number of displaced people could be much, much higher.
Maybe as high as 140,000.
Potentially. It just shows you how facts get twisted when these big strategic interests are on the line.
And beyond the GERD narrative, Ethiopia also tries to connect its own internal security problems to Egypt.
That's right. The source mentions their ongoing conflict with the Fano and Amhara militia groups. Ethiopia accuses its neighbor, Eritrea, of supporting these groups.
And these militias have reportedly killed 18 Ethiopian soldiers recently.
Correct. And then they try to complete the circle, suggesting that Egypt is the one supporting Eritrea in an effort to destabilize their government. It's a narrative designed to paint Egypt as the aggressor on multiple fronts.
Okay, let's pivot back for a second to a technical detail that really drives home the value of this glide technology. It reinforces why Egypt making it locally is such a big deal.
Ah, yes.
We need to talk about the U.S. request to retrieve an unexploded GBU-39 glide bomb.
Right, one that Israel used in Lebanon to assassinate a Hezbollah commander, Haytham al-Tabtabai. This anecdote just perfectly highlights the fear around this specific tech.
The GBU-39 is a smaller glide bomb, but the U.S. was desperate to get it back.
Absolutely desperate. Their concern was that the guidance package, that little INS GPS kit, would fall into the hands of rivals, Russia, China, Iran. The worry wasn't about the bomb's explosive. It was all about the cheap, motorless guidance system itself.
So, just to be clear for you listening, the U.S. is terrified of its rivals reverse engineering the guidance kit from a tiny $50,000 bomb.
Right.
And at the same time, Egypt has just announced it can domestically produce a guidance kit for a massive 2,000-pound munition.
It connects all the dots perfectly. This technology is the definition of low-cost, high-impact defense. It's a total game changer for self-sufficiency.
And does the source offer any ideas on how Egypt managed this leap?
It does. It offers a sort of a personal but informed analysis, a hypothesis. It suggests that the glide technology for the Mk-84 might have been developed through cooperation with Turkey.
Interesting. Why Turkey?
Well, Turkey has already developed very similar systems. They're NIB-1 and NIB-2 smart bombs, and both countries participate jointly in Edex. So it points to a potential shared knowledge project that might have fast-tracked Egypt's timeline.
Which brings us to the strategic conclusion, the so what moment. Is the source confident that these actions by Israel and Ethiopia were actually coordinated?
The analysis is definitive on this. The simultaneous timing, the specific nature of the attacks, it all strongly suggests coordination.
So not just random friction.
Not at all. They're framed as an immediate, unified response meant to contain Egypt's undeniable military growth, which they put on full display at Edex. And it wasn't just the glide bomb, it was also new local drones, like the Jabar series.
And that leads right to the core insight about Egypt's strategy, doesn't it? They have consistently chosen not to retaliate, especially over the GRD.
Right. They've been totally focused on military self-sufficiency and economic growth. They're even making huge profits from military exports to countries like Algeria and Iraq.
And that focus on long-term growth is the real threat to their rivals.
It is. This unchecked growth is forcing these other regional powers to try and, as the source puts it, drag Egypt into a predictable fight.
Because they're afraid of where Egypt will be in 10 years if it just keeps building.
Exactly. They fear the long-term implications.
Yeah.
Because when a country achieves that level of military self-sufficiency, you can't contain it with the old levers of power anymore.
And what does this coordinated attempt at containment say about the internal state of those rival powers?
The source argues it actually highlights their own growing isolation. Ethiopia is struggling politically. It's surrounded by neighbors like Djibouti, Somalia, and Eritrea who are turning against it.
And Israel.
Similarly, the sources suggest Israel's regional position is becoming more isolated, that its existing peace treaties are becoming fragile, potentially just ink on paper.
So, to sum up the key takeaway for you, a single piece of military tech unveiled quietly at an expo signaled a deep power shift in the region. And that shift immediately triggered a coordinated backlash from rivals who are terrified of a rising power that refuses to be drawn into predictable fights.
And this really raises an important question for all of us, as we watch these global dynamics change. If a locally produced, unmotorized, low-cost glide bomb can spark this level of high-level diplomatic coordination between two major rivals, what does that tell us about the real power of simple, sustainable defense tech in shaping politics?
What other affordable technologies might be silently shifting the balance of power right now?
Exactly.
A truly crucial insight into the new math of power. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. We'll see you next time.